back to another episode of Vlogs Reviews. No, just I apologise for that accent. I don't know where that came from. Welcome back to another episode of Luke's Reviews, and I have been very lucky. I've been very fortunate to see The Irishman. Now, it's coming out on Netflix. In fact, by the time this video is up, it will already be out on Netflix. But I was very fortunate enough to get the opportunity to see The Irishman in cinemas. There was a local showing nearby that I just took the opportunity with both hands, and I went for it. I wouldn't have minded seeing The Irishman on Netflix, but I wanted to experience this 3.5 hour epic story in a cinema. So yeah, if you don't know what The Irishman is, just why? It's Martin Scorsese's newest gangster crime epic. Again, Scorsese's at the helm. You've got a cast including Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, Al Pacino, as well as some supporting roles like Harvey Keitel, Ray Romano, Anna Paquin. And within this 209-minute epic, Scorsese introduces us to Frank Sheehan, played by Robert De Niro. When we meet Frank, he's ferrying meat carcasses to the butchers. However, he is given the opportunity to transport this meat to a different producer working for them in covert. From then on, Frank is indoctrinated into the world of crime. That leads him to meet Joe Pesci's Russell Bufalino, a member of the Bufalino crime family, who takes him under his wing as Sheehan's hands are getting increasingly dirty. This then sets him on a course with Jimmy Hoffa, played by Pacino, the president of the Team Masters, which is an independent union, and this is where loyalties begin to get tested. I think it's fair to say that the most notable thing that people are going to pick up on with The Irishman is that it's not exactly a short film. No, not at all. It's 3.5 hours long. Yeah, I do think that is going to initially put off a lot of people. 3.5 hours, that's a good chunk of your day dedicated to one film. But I've got to say, it's the perfect length. The Irishman is a really deep character study of just this one man who gets embroiled up into this life of crime and follows the events that he finds himself caught up in. Not to mention that this story basically picks up the point that Sheehan enters this world to the very moment that he departs it. And even though you can certainly feel this movie's length, you walk out going, yeah, that was a long film. It's never boring. You're captivated, or at least I was captivated for almost every second, if not every second. And I can't think of a way that it could possibly be trimmed down or cut to maybe a more accessible time frame. This movie needs to be this long because the scale of it is just so epic. And the reason why it never drags is that every single filmmaking element here is executed to perfection. Scorsese's direction is exquisite. What I love about him is that even though he is such an acclaimed and beloved filmmaker, he is still learning with every film. He's trying out something new. He has such a lock on these characters, this world, this story, that every time we meet a new character, they're practically leaping out of the screen because of how rich and new this material they've been given. He paces the film to perfection. There is never a dull moment, and yet at the same time, this film's pulse never really goes crazy. And I feel like the unsung hero of this film is Scorsese's longtime editor, Thelma Schoonmaker, who, without her, yeah, probably that 3.5 hour runtime, you're gonna really feel it. It's her amazing skill to keep this movie flowing with her captivating energy, adding in her own unique sprinkles that Scorsese films are known for. Without her, I don't think this movie would be as great as it is. And you combine all of that with some great cinematography, a terrific screenplay that is able to intersect various timelines and yet keeps you, the audience, and itself atop of it like it's some huge industrial machine. It makes The Irishman not just one of 2019's best films, but honestly, up there with some of Scorsese's classics. Obviously, there has to be some sort of a driving force to help you catapult along for the ride, and what better anchor to have with you than Robert De Niro? I think I think we start to take Robert De Niro for granted because for the past few years he's kind of just been almost he's been there in a lot of supporting roles, either in fairly humdrum films or just not really showing up. And yet here, Scorsese just lets him lead the way in what I do consider to be one of his best roles in so many years. Because even though we see Frank commit these horrible acts, it's De Niro's charm and personality that is able to sort of seep through this character that still he's so endearing. He's such a likable presence. He's not doing this for any malicious reasons. Yes, he's a flawed human being, but he's still a human being. He has layers to him. There's a real quiet charisma to him. Ultimately, all he wants is to just live happily with his family and friends, and if that means doing some shady things for some people, then yeah, he'll do it. Al Pacino also puts in one of his best performances again in years. Hoffa is a proper charmer, but he has this incredibly short fuse that when that fuse is lit and then runs short, Pacino just explodes like a wild animal. He's hurling very Scorsese-like insult at whoever's in his way. It's a very showy role. I will say that. I don't think that's a criticism. It is Pacino just going crazy at points, but he does it so damn well. But also, it's this relationship that he shares with De Niro's Frank Sheehan that ultimately that's the film's heart. That's where this movie really does soar. As for Joe Pesci as well, I mean, I would say it's his like best role in years, but I genuinely think it's one of his only roles in years. But again, he's so damn good. This is a very different role to what we've seen from the likes of Pesci in Goodfellas. He's not shouty. Instead, Buffalino is a very cool, calm, collected individual who never raises his temper. And initially, you think, oh, he's quite a friendly, charming buddy. Yeah, he seems like a really really good guy. But as that film progresses, and again, because you've got such a long runtime, you can really spread this out. There's no rushing here, and you start to realize that yeah, he's quite unsettling when he needs to be. And if there's one person you don't want to cross in this film, it's him. There are some smaller performances like Ray Romano, Harvey Keitel, Anna Paquin, who are all solid. They don't get a great deal of time in the film, but they're good when they need to be. I'm a huge fan of Stephen Graham, so it was really nice to see him show up in the film. And he gets possibly my favourite scene of the film, which is a fantastic verbal sparring sequence between him and Pacino. And I think it's a pretty damn good sign if you're able to stand toe to toe with Pacino in a scene like that. So I'm kind of hoping this really pushes him for bigger and better things. However, even though that Scorsese is in familiar territory, a genre like this is pretty much his wheelhouse. He's kind of defined it for the modern era. He does something which I was so pleased to see, in that for the first hour or so, he's firing everything at you like a rate of knots. He is going 110 miles an hour at you, and then in almost an instant, the tone changes, and what we get is a very contemplative, reflective look on the life of one man who's looking back on his life, the mistakes that he's made, the consequences he's had to deal with since. There's no explosive conclusion, there's no giant twist. Ultimately, it's just one man reflecting on his life. This isn't the glamorous life of the gangster that Ray Liotta suggested at the beginning of Goodfellas. This is a really somber, hard-hitting, emotional in places, and come the final half an hour or so, poignant look at a life of just one man. We also get these flashcards that momentarily appear on screen when we're introduced to a new character, revealing the details of this person's death. And initially you kind of think of it as a darkly comic take for Scorsese to mention, and then you begin to notice that Scorsese really is going away from that whole glitz and glam of the gangster life and treating it for what it is. There are no happy endings. And by the end, it kind of came clear to me that this wasn't the Scorsese that directed Goodfellas. Instead, this was the Scorsese that directed Silence. And aside from the length, probably one of the biggest talking points about the film is the use of the de-aging techniques, because this, like I said, this story is epic. Literally decades long epic. And instead of recast the roles for a younger Frank or a younger Russell or a younger Jimmy, what they did is Scorsese implemented de-aging techniques, so you get scenes of Robert De Niro in, I want to say, like his late 20s, early 30s, supposedly, in World War II, or in his like mid to late 40s, when he's sort of initiating, becoming part of this gang, all the way up to the late 90s. Initially, it is a tad disorientating. It kind of looked, to begin with, like a porcelain-like figure, something that we'd see in Welcome to Marwen, which is not a good thing. But within like 15, 20 minutes or so, that disappeared. They were pretty much indistinguishable, because you were getting so wrapped up in this story that you didn't notice that De Niro's face was looking a less wrinklier or a lot more sheener. If I do have any nitpicks, and in all honesty this is probably my only nitpick of the film, is that sometimes I would often use the alterations in the VFX to determine what time period this was set in, because we are constantly cutting back and forth between various time periods, and it wasn't necessarily an issue, it was just something that I began to pick up on, and it did take me out of the film momentarily, but like I said, otherwise, The Irishman is damn good. Honestly, The Irishman needs to be seen to be believed. If you can't get yourself to a cinema, lock yourself in a room for 3.5 hours and treat yourself to a cinematic accomplishment. This is the best Scorsese, De Niro, Pesci, and Pacino have been for years. To say that a 3.5 hour movie kept me engrossed for every second is a true testament to just how fantastic this movie is. Overall, I'm going to give The Irishman a 9.5 out of 10. Anyway guys, those are my thoughts on The Irishman. Let me know what you thought of the film down in the comments below, as well as my question to you. What is your favourite Martin Scorsese film? Also, we are literally on the final few days of November, so that means that we're on the final few days of No Shave / Neckbeard November. If you haven't donated already to my fundraiser, I will include a link if you would like to do so, so thank you very much. Thanks for watching! Let me know what you thought of this film down in the comments below. If you have enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. The links to all of my social media accounts are in the description below. Many thanks for watching guys, and I shall see you in the next video.